Hi, this is Julie Wald, and we're here with your superior self.
Perfection. Julie, thank you for taking the time. I can't wait to talk to you about everything that you got going on. Thank you.
Amazing. Me too.
So, your story is very interesting. You have a book, right? Um, Best-selling book. You're a Reiki healer. Is that right? Reiki healer,
That is
meditation
right.
teacher, yoga instructor. Um, Used to be a social worker, right? A clinical social worker, treating adults, children, adolescents. And I can just imagine like how complex that could be by itself. But then you throw on all the other holistic type of modalities. Back in 1995, I'm assuming your training was more of a Newtonian type of materialistic type of training. I'm kind of experiencing that now because I'm going back to psychology.
Nice.
Um, but did you ever, I mean, did you have this type of mindset where you were very, I don't know, curious about holistic modalities or alternate medicine?
Absolutely. I mean, I came to that work because, quite frankly, I really needed tools and resources personally as well as professionally. I was young. I went to, social work school, undergrad and graduate school at NYU, and I was working with some incredibly disenfranchised, mentally ill, struggling populations of people. And um, throughout my career, I've worked with a huge spectrum of people in different types of circumstances. One thing I've learned is there's sort of universal truths across all of those different people. But at that exact chapter, I was facing some pretty intense challenges at work, and on a personal level, I was navigating some of my own health stuff, and all of that made me realize that I needed my own tools and resources to just manage it all, manage the stress, manage the fear, manage in some cases the pain. And I grew a lot from that.
Mm-hmm. Did you find yourself taking on like being very empathetic towards I don't want to say clients. I don't know if they're clients or not, but like the people that you were helping during those times?
For sure. I mean, it's really that's a big part of the work is really being able to meet people where they are and understand that and have compassion for that. And there definitely were days where I would leave work and I'd be holding real worries for people that I was working with who were in very real life, challenging and sometimes dangerous situations. Um, so so yeah, I think sort of love is a superpower when you're in that work. It's
Mm-hmm.
certainly something that I've found is sort of the essential ingredient in working with all people. I don't think I've ever worked closely with a client in any of the capacities that I've worked with clients and not in all of the most appropriate ways, just ultimately fallen in love with them. Um, but on the other half of that is boundaries. You need to
Mm-hmm.
have boundaries, and you need um to practice self-care and know when know when you need to set some limits to sort of protect your own energy reserves and your own health and well-being.
Are you still doing that work now?
I do. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do that work. I do. I really do two things. I run a company called Golden. It was formerly called Namaste Wellness, and we support organizations and individuals in figuring out how to optimize mental health and well-being and productivity in the workplace. And then I also have a really fulfilling private practice where I work with all different kinds of people in a very integrative therapeutic way.
Mm-hmm. During your clinical training, did they ever give you methods for that self-care, that self-healing, that, because I'm finding the deeper that I go into my studies, it's like, they give you ways, to assess patients or clients. And it's more so like, reaching out and really connecting with them. But at the end of the day, like if you're, empathetic, right? You take on some of those characteristics, and it's kind of hard to sometimes create barriers, right? Did they ever teach you any of those, like, modalities or techniques to help you through those trying times?
Not in my traditional training, no. Those were things that I had to seek out on my own. And fortunately at the time I was living and working in New York City. So there was so many, I mean, this goes back to kind of the late 90s, early 2000s. And there were so many different places where I sought out that kind of training, but not in my traditional, you know, undergrad or graduate degree in social work. So they didn't address it. My guess is they probably address it more now, but I could be wrong. Maybe you can speak to that. But I went to yoga studios, and I went to Zen centers, and I went to meditation centers, and I went to every kind of healer that you could possibly imagine. And that was really my journey. I
Mm-hmm.
also did a lot of traveling and looking for practices. I traveled all over Asia and India, and all of that work really informed that self-care toolkit that I managed to put together.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, so I'm a big advocate for positive psychology, and they are more so about individual well-being and flourishing. So there is some ancient traditions where they teach you meditation and different types of, I haven't gotten there yet, but I've read some of the syllabuses and what's to come down the road. But it is more so, how do I approach this from a well-being aspect? And I'm finding that a lot of this stuff is not out there in the mainstream. Like maybe it is now, it's starting to surface a little bit more, but like the stuff that you're into, like Reiki, I've never heard of that before until I started getting more curious about different healing techniques, or energy healing, or healing with the mind, yoga. Like I've heard of yoga, but I didn't really know about yoga. So energy just in the body has been fascinating to me, right? Like the trauma that we carry, cell memory, a lot of the research that in the literature that I'm reading about that now is just fascinating. It's blowing my mind, because we're not like the deterministic type of machines that people thought we were hundreds of years ago, right? Like there's just so much more to the body than we've ever believed or ever known. And that's why I wanted to talk to you. What like you said, you traveled a lot, and you grew up in New York, right, where they had a lot of this stuff. Maybe it wasn't like, posted on, maybe it was posted on like street corners, but like I don't know how you found these different modalities. What was it like? Was there a curiosity from the get-go with you, or was it like something, or a conversation, or just kind of like being around the environment where it was like, man, I got to find out what Reiki is, or I got to go do
No,
yoga?
it was pain. It was
Yeah.
totally pain and curiosity. I, you know, I think oftentimes, we need a pain point to push us in a certain direction. And one of the things I always say, and I read this in a children's book many years ago, was good luck and bad luck is all mixed up, because you never know what's going to happen next. So, I've really found that to be true in my path. But I was dealing with a lot of health issues at the time personally, which were very much related to stress. And I was working with my clients who in some cases were, suicidal adolescents, or, people who were in therapy to avoid incarceration, and, had done some, pretty tough stuff. And, at one point I worked with, um, mentally ill, a mentally ill elderly population that was homebound and destitute and had no family. And they were basically sort of like the state was the guardian of these people. So another juncture in my career, I worked with children aged 5 and under who had been severely abused physically and sexually. So I was seeing a lot of the shadow, a lot of the dark side of life and a lot of the suffering. Um, and I needed a way to process that, to understand that, to move that through my body, to figure out how to show up day after day and, and hold people in compassion and in love and have my own sense of strength and resilience. And I also had a lot, as I mentioned, I had some of my own health issues bubble up as a result of, various stressors in my own life. And all of that kind of came together. And there was some choices, right? I could have just found a lot of unhealthy coping strategies, which I did at times, right? There's a lot of ways we can numb out and not deal with the feelings that we're holding at the end of a day, after whatever we've done, whether it's that you've worked with people who are struggling or whether it's just that you had a stressful day at work. It doesn't really matter what you do. We can cope with that in a variety of different ways. And so at a certain point, I realized like there's choices. Either I'm just going to go, get wasted every night, or I'm going to figure out how to move this through my body and my mind and make it an opportunity for growth and personal development and healing. And so that's when I said, well, what's around here? Like, what can I do? What can I learn? And I that was back in the day when there would be like a piece of paper posted on, a bulletin board with all these little rip-off things that you would tear off. And, it would say like, come to a yoga class or come to this meditation place. And I'd be in New York City in some cafe or, health food store and rip off a little tag. And then I just followed the breadcrumbs and I went, and explored, and one thing led to another, which led to another, which led to another. And then eventually I decided I needed to do some traveling and see what was happening in other parts of the world in terms of, some of the energy work and the yoga and the mindfulness. And it was awesome.
Where'd you travel?
I spent a lot of time in Southeast Asia and I also spent a lot of time in India. I did some Central and South America too, but the brunt of my time was in Southeast Asia and in India. So I was in Thailand, I was in Cambodia, I was in Laos, I was in mostly the northern part of India. And it was amazing. It was exactly what I needed to kind of deepen a lot of what I had picked up living in New York.
I went to Thailand when I was in college, first time in college. I wasn't even 21 yet. And I was just too young and dumb to even appreciate being over there. Went over there with a friend. He stayed with us in the States and went over after high school with him. And we hung out in Bangkok and then we went south to Phuket and it was amazing. But India, right? So is that where, so I'm new to Reiki. Kind of explain what Reiki is. Like, are you a Reiki master?
I am a Reiki master. Reiki is, it's really, it's energy work. So it is where you, open your body up to basically be a channel for energy. And it is a really, really beautiful practice. It's something that, the energy basically comes through your hands. It can be done hands on the body. It can be done at a distance. It's it's both subtle and very, very powerful at the same time. You can do it on yourself. I do it on myself many nights when I'm, going to sleep at night. It's very calming. It's very soothing. It's oftentimes used when people are having any kind of physical illness. It's a wonderful way to kind of create some movement of the chi, the energy through the body. And it was a powerful tool of mine, particularly back, when I was first learning all of these practices. That was huge for me.
Healing with energy, like I just, it's so fascinating to me how we're able to do that just by aligning, the chakras and kind of aligning the energy flow in our body. You see it a lot in a lot of people where, dis-ease, right? There's this chaos in the body. The energy flow is getting stuck somewhere. So you're seeing injuries and, as a result of that. I run quite a bit. So like I'll get energy, stuck energy in my hip. And it's not like, and it turns into like a manifestation of physical pain. And then when I can stretch out, when I can really stretch, not like, some bull crap, like, 30-second stretch, but when I really take the time, like an hour to stretch my body and I can kind of recenter myself, like the energy flow it's insane, like how it just starts to get better. So like, I'm definitely all in on Reiki, right? But I think there's more to it than that. I think it's more to it than just energy. I think there's, meditation, right? Like you're a meditation teacher, right?
Yes.
How long, like, so I can just imagine you in India, right? Like you're in an ashram, right? Like you're meditating. Did you pick up Reiki over there? Like when did that come into play?
No, Reiki I found in New York, actually. Before I went to India, I found Reiki, and that was again, just kind of one of those breadcrumbs on my path. And I thought it was pretty powerful. I had some really personally amazing experiences with it where I was the recipient of Reiki, and I said, ooh, okay, what's this all about? And then even when you receive Reiki, you kind of feel like you're, as you said, like the energy is flowing through your body. It kind of opens up your channels. And I very, very naturally felt kind of called to learn the practice. And for me, it's, these are all very kind of integrative tools that I use in different ways in my own life and with my clients. But yes, I mean, yoga is also an energy-based practice. It's also about moving energy through the body. Same with things like acupressure or acupuncture or shiatsu, which is using the different, the different channels in the body or the meridians in the body. Tai Chi, Qigong, those are also energy-based practices. And so, one of the things that I learned, as you were mentioning, kind of early on in my work, was that, both emotions, feelings, got stuck in the body and caused disease. And then, in other cases, there would be tension in the body, and that would cause kind of discomfort in my mind. Like if I, for example, would exercise too much and not stretch, or I mean, I usually didn't have that problem because I like to stretch a lot, but one might have that problem. Or if I was holding a lot of tension in my body for another reason, it would contract the experience of my mind. And so one of the things that I've really focused a lot on through my career is that actually mind-body connection, and the fact that like the mind affects the body, and then actually the body also affects the mind. And sometimes we can work with our mind to try to relax our body, and other times we can actually work with our body to relax our mind, depending on what feels most accessible to us.
I'm going to throw you a curveball because I've been pondering this for quite a while now. What do you think comes first, the thought or the emotion?
The thought or the emotion? I almost think it's more complicated than that.
Oh,
I
I know it
think
is.
that,
It is.
yeah,
And I don't mean to like put you on the spot, but I like,
no, I think it's a really, really, really good question. I think we, I think the thought comes first, if it's a one or the other. Um, but I think what happens is, neurologically, we have a trigger or a response to something that might, for example, sense danger. This is a threat to me. Either this person's a threat to me, this email is a threat to me, my boss is a threat to me, my partner's a threat, whatever it is, that is a threat to me. And that experience, the brain processes that experience in a very primitive way. And as a result, our bodies kind of respond as if we're under threat, as if we're not okay. And and then when our bodies respond to that kind of neurological trigger that's like you're being threatened, that makes us feel unsafe, anxious, worried, and then come the feelings. So the thought is kind of somewhere baked into that kind of neurological trigger where like but it's also kind of a feeling, like it's an instinct that we're unsafe. And then the body responds. It's like a machine, the body. If you think about it, for example, if you're really, really worried about something and you can't sleep, it's most likely because the primitive part of your brain actually thinks it's in danger, like it's experiencing a threat of some sort. And so if you could picture yourself, out in the wilderness in a tent, or in primitive times, if there's a tiger outside your tent, you're not going to sleep. There's a threat there. And so people are like, why can't I sleep? Well, it's probably because you feel unsafe, because you feel threatened by something, by some thought, by some idea. Something has triggered that in you. And then it's this feeling, maybe that feeling is worry or anxiety or whatever you want to call it. And then it just kind of ripples from there. So I don't know if I exactly answered your question, but
it's like one of the, it's like one of those ideas that just gnaw at you, right? Like just, I've always, what comes first? I thought of the emotion, because the emotions are there. They've been there since childhood, right? Like traumas, past traumas, cellular memory, Bruce Lipton's work, that's all in there. And then the thought, it's, the body is a mechanism. It's kind of like Descartes, right? The mind body kind of thing, the behaviors.
Absolutely.
But for me, it's I think the thought comes first, like you said, but the emotion, if you don't deal with it, it stays there, right? Like if you don't, like some of the work that you do, the energy work, like if you don't get that energy out, like it's like what Wayne Dyer says a lot, you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange juice, like it's because the orange juice isn't already in there. So when you get into a situation where you're triggered by something and anger comes out, that anger was already there. It's been there. You know what I mean? I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So like for me, your work, the work that have been doing on myself is kind of like, when I get angry, I have to know that it's already there it's there for some reason. And I have to find out why, and I have to heal that why. And then I can move on, meditation for me has been a turning point in my life. It has been a tool that I use to connect with my higher source and my higher consciousness. And it allows me to receive information and guidance in my life. And it's pointed me in this direction. And I've had nothing but faith and doubt, really. I mean, because we doubt what intuition we receive, because we're so conditioned to rely on our sense data, like the sight, the hearing, the audible, the taste, the smell. We don't know what is right or wrong in our meditations. We doubt that, like unless you have like an aha moment of experience, I don't know if you ever, had those, like the oneness, the connecting with the one consciousness type of experiences that you hear about, especially in Indian traditions. Unless we have those experiences, we're always questioning whether or not it's real, just because of our conditioning, just because of our indoctrinations, or maybe even our social economic status. I don't know. For me, it's chasing that, but then again, in chasing that, is that holding me up? It's just it's kind of like this dilemma I'm in, right? Like I'm all about what you're in, and it's like I just kind of gotta like cut loose a little bit and allow it to come, and as it comes, I grow. Have you ever experienced like what I'm talking about, like in your meditations? Like when you went to India, did you do like a month retreat, like of silence and meditation? Like what did that look like?
Yeah, I've done some longer retreats, and I I think sometimes those moments, those aha moments that you're talking about, actually sometimes they come when you're least expecting it. It's not always when you're in the ashram, or sometimes those can be some of the more painful. That's kind of like the work. Um, but the other morning I was taking a walk, and it was a really kind of mindful walk, and I was really present, and I had just meditated right before, and it was a really beautiful day, um and I had one of those moments where I was just completely and totally present, where I could hear the birds and the sounds, and everything was incredibly like vivid, and it was just this absolutely stunning awake moment in time. And you know impermanence is real, so it can be fleeting, but I think that it's those moments that happen that kind of keep us doing our work, and keep us coming back, and keep us in it. And I think over time, those moments get more frequent, um and sometimes we go through dry patches. I've been doing all this work now for over 30 years, and so I've had different chapters, when I've had babies and little kids, and when I've had really hard times or stressful personal times, or really amazing chapters of my life where I felt completely in the flow. And it's always changing and evolving, but I do think that those moments sometimes they happen when we're
Mm-hmm.
least kind of looking for them, as long as we've been doing our work, as long as we've been really, I guess it's all about doing your work consistently, and then that stuff happens.
Sure. I'm a big believer in the universe will help you when like not when it notices you, but like when you're really serious about the work, like I feel like then the universe starts helping you along the way, and
Mhm.
giving you those breadcrumbs. Um, Interesting, your work, you have this moment of just clarity of just resonating on, with mother nature, with
Mhm.
with the moment. And you come home to teenagers, right? and
Right.
now it's out the window. How do you transfer that over to your life? Like, how do you transfer that over? Like, I'm a father, I have 3 kids. My son will be 12 in April. And how do you have those conversations about this type of work with them? I mean, do
Mm.
you, or you just kind of let them go?
Yeah, it's a balance there, because maybe our kids need to kind of have their own path, and we can kind of project our path onto them, but they're not always interested. They're Sometimes they might be, and sometimes they might not be, and it sort of depends, but it depends on the kid, obviously. Um, for me, it just shows up in my parenting, in ways that I don't think I'm even conscious of, but um it's part of my language. And I don't try to like shove it down their throats, for lack of a better word. I'm not telling them like, you know, I don't should them a lot. I don't think kids like to be, you know, my friends girls taught me this phrase who are also teenagers, which I love, and it cracks me up. But, you know, whenever we tell them like you should be doing something, they say like, don't should on me, you know, like stop shooting all over me. Like I'm good without your shoulds. And so I'm really mindful not to should my kids. You know, I think that they need to find their path, and it's my job to show up for them and share what I've learned and share my wisdom, and but also my imperfections. So, you know, I think we set our kids up if we try to make it seem like we're always perfect. I mean, I'm not, so it's easy to not fake it that much, but even if we try, I don't know that that's so healthy for kids. And yeah, and I think it's been there for me. This work is there for me when things have been challenging with my kids. I've just nursed 3 kids through, like, so to speak, through a crazy pandemic. You know, my son is almost 17. I have a 14-year-old, and then I have an 11-year-old, and it was a crazy chapter for these teenagers. And so I had to use all the tools in my toolkit with them. And I also have outsourced a little bit. So I know what's really powerful, but I also know that as their mom, I can't necessarily be the one to teach them everything, because they don't need me to show up as their sort of spiritual teacher. They need me to show up as their mother. And so, and certainly there's aspects of it all woven up into one, but I, you know, my son, my 14-year-old, works with an amazing woman who's like a mindfulness teacher and a yoga teacher. And she's just kind of just an extraordinary, special human being. And this is how it shows up. So I picked him up from this session with this woman, and he said to me, her name is Missy. And he gets in the car and he says, Mom, is Missy an enlightened being? And I said, well, she's one of the more enlightened beings that I know. And he said, you know, like the kind of person that sees the light in everyone. And I was like, yes. Okay. Like he's been here, like that was his language. Like I didn't say anything to him. I didn't say she's so great, she's so enlightened. Like all the years that I've been his mom, somehow he picked up on the fact that like it's all about seeing the light in other people. And if you do that, then you are very special. And I guess that's sort of an example of how maybe it shows up.
That's a huge example. Like, I don't know if my kid would ever consider someone else another being. Like, you say, like, I just think that's so beautiful, you know, like, I think it's important for them to have a foundation, right? Like I've grown up in churches, right? Methodist, Catholic, and it never resonated with me, right? To be fearful of a God, you know, of a creator, and then try to be perfect to earn their love. I just never really sat with me. But I am like you. I'm not trying to push them. You know, when they ask me questions. They're like, you know, Dad, what is your podcast about? Right? Like, so they're learning how to Google things, and they're Googling my podcast, and my podcast is very, you know, it's not religious. It's you know, spiritual. It's about finding your own consciousness, how to raise your consciousness, how to look at it at a different lens outside of dogma and indoctrination, and how to flourish. And so how do you say that to a almost 12-year-old? You know, I'm just kind of like, buddy, it's about life. But but having those conversations, and the important part is to start having them. I don't care how uncomfortable they are. Just like, you don't even have to have the basic verbiage. Just kind of like, you know what, buddy, we're just here to talk about what makes you feel good. Like, what do you see in other people? Like, what positive traits do you see in other people that you like, and try to share those, and try to encourage them to keep being more of that. And it's funny. He's been gone. He's been at camp for a week of retreat. Their school does this every year. And I feel like I just sent him away to college. Like, he's been gone. He has limited cell service. He doesn't even have a cell phone. So they have to call from a payphone or something. So it's been I've really been grateful, for one, for being a father during this, right? Two, that we have the relationship that we have. And as I look around, like, the events that are going on in this world right now, like, that I'm not going off to war. We're not fleeing our country. Like, he'll come back tomorrow and I'll get to see him and hug him. But it's crazy how all of this has been brought to my attention just through conversations, the podcast, mindfulness, all of the things we're talking about.
I love that. One of the things that I've also found to be really helpful, is, and all within kind of appropriate boundaries, because we never want to freak our kids out, but, sometimes just sharing kind of things, sharing my own experience in a way that's just really simple and digestible. So for example, I might say, instead of saying like, you should do this, I'll say, gosh, I was so overwhelmed today because I had this thing happen at work, and then I had something else, and then the doorbell rang, and so it was amazing. And I was like about to lose it. And then I just remembered that I was supposed to take 5 deep breaths. Maybe this is like a dinner table conversation, and I just remembered that if I just took 5 deep breaths, I would be okay. And so I did it. And even though I teach this, and even though it's like, it was amazing to me that it actually worked. And so I'll share things like a story from an I perspective, because then they're just kind of picking it up and they're like, okay, that's interesting. And, my kid may have no interest in me teaching them how to do breathing work or anything like that, but they'll listen to a story that I tell them about something that happened to me, and that's a learning moment for them. And so, and it's a nice way for me to just connect with them. So I find sometimes just sharing, kind of like for you to say, gosh, I had such an interesting conversation with somebody on my podcast last night. It was fascinating. Like, we were talking about this, and I just, just to share it like that, like really naturally, could be a nice way to kind of weave it into your parenting, which you probably already do, but
What's tough. He's like one of those introverts that it's very hard to talk, right? Like, it's funny talking to a conversation, like on the phone. It's like, hi, Dad. Hey, buddy, what's
right.
going on? How are you doing? Good.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
I know the feeling, believe me.
What was your favorite part of the day? Zip line.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
But
Believe me.
I'm sure you probably have the same experience with your clients
Absolutely.
that are especially in like the business world, right? Like, I mean, I was looking at your profile, and the clients that you have that are, I feel like the business world is coming to its senses more as far as well-being, right? Are they open to Reiki yet?
I think so, actually, interestingly. And again, like, I think sometimes it takes a certain level of pain before people decide to open up to things. And unfortunately, our world has been a pretty painful place to be, in varying levels of severity, depending on where you are and who you are and what you've been through. And you know, it's just been such an intense several years, that I think, necessity is the mother of invention, that people have been more open than ever before to all different kinds of ways of healing and self-care and thinking about these things. I mean, we're having a massive mental health crisis right now. It's really insane what's happening. And we need all the help we can get. Bring in the Reiki, bring in the therapist, bring in the meditation, bring it, like, you name it, we need it. And so I think people are more open than ever before, even people who maybe historically you would never have thought would have been open to this kind of work.
Bring in the Reiki. Oh, well-being. Mental health. Yeah. I mean, the suicide rates alone are just, it's crazy. I saw something the other day. I can't remember what study it was. I think it was on the Positive Psychology website, the World Positive Psychology Association or something. And there was a symposium of lectures on there about female suicide rates of young girls, teenage suicide rates, and they were all positively correlated with social media accounts. And I'm looking at my daughter, she's 9. I'm like, you're never getting social media ever. Right. Like, it's crazy because, he was talking about the guys and how the kids are like, they're playing, war games or fighting games. And, the literature is still kind of hazy about if that translate into being more violent. You can go both ways with the literature, but when it comes to female suicide rates, there's a direct correlation with it, because girls it's not, you're not seeing a magazine anymore with these glamour photos, these bikini shots. And you very rarely would you see that growing up back in my day, right? Like, unless your parents had magazines around, or, you had cable or something, MTV. But now you're seeing your friends are on Instagram, your friends, and they have these filters that they can use. And so now the girls are looking at their friends and being like, oh, she's so beautiful, why can't I be like that? So, right. It's just painful. And we're just going to have to adapt. We're going to have to adapt as parents on how, I don't even know where we go from here. Like, it's just
crazy,
mind-boggling.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. It's a scary, I'm with you on that. It's kind of like, what is going to have to happen to help people decide to change the status quo? I mean, what's amazing is that, like, it's such an incredibly powerful force. I think a lot of parents just don't even know how to stand up against it. It's just, particularly through the pandemic, you take it, when, especially with kids, my kids' age, you take away their devices or their access to media, and they feel completely isolated from everyone, that they know, and their whole generation. And, this is their generation. This is their kind of pop culture. This is what it is. And, as parents, we're caught kind of between a rock and a hard place there, because society is powerful, and it's hard to fight up against that unless you're, like, really planning on living, in a commune somewhere, like, disconnected from it all, which doesn't sound like such a bad idea, to be honest. But yeah, I think, listen, what we do is we limit things, right? So my kids have limitations on what they can access and how long they can access it, so maybe they have 20 minutes on different apps. And it doesn't solve the problem, because they can still bump into the imagery and everything that you're talking about. But it also hopefully makes them spend more time doing other things, because they're not there. And the more time we can spend doing other things, the less time we're spending down that rabbit hole. And yet we're not creating a dynamic where, you know, there's total disconnection and we as parents are the enemy. I mean, you bump up, this is tricky with teenagers. 9 years old is easy or easier. But once they get to that place where they're trying to separate and individuate from you, and their peers are really their priority and what's most important, they communicate with their peers through social media, not so much through texting or other, you know, other modes. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I know, you know, TikTok right now. I got off Facebook. I was on Facebook when it came out in college, and I got off it, and my life has been phenomenal without it. Like I don't know what's going on, you know, outside of the war in Ukraine, but I don't care, you know, like I love being disconnected from that, you know, like I'll ask my wife about, you know, what's going on in the community, or what, you know, what's the gossip, you know, amongst our friends. But there's actually a couple that lives in our neighborhood that never had Facebook, and they're totally disconnected. I mean, they have cell phones but they don't, you know, they're off the grid for the most part. And it's fascinating. I mean, once you disconnect from that, you start reconnecting with other areas, you know, nature, you know. I found that there's something called forest bathing.
Yeah.
That is
That's
phenomenal.
kind of what I was doing when I was telling you about my walk. Because I live in an area where it's very woodsy and lots of nature, and forest bathing is, yeah, that's when I get those moments of aha, like you said earlier.
So are you walking around naked, or is that forest
Not
bathing?
naked. No, you don't have to be naked to forest bathe. You can just be in nature. Basically, forest bathing, as far as I understand it, is basically like taking a hike, but
Sure.
being mindful and conscious and aware and soaking up nature and being really present.
Mm. Yeah, because there's a whole nother consciousness out there that you can
Yeah.
connect with, you know, like Mother
Mhm.
Gaia, you know, and receive
Yeah.
that information. I got to ask you, you know, with your experience in meditation, have you ever had like some pretty prolific like experiences?
Yeah. I've had some amazing experiences, and, you know, really just opening and uh uh blissful, where there's deep connection to source, to that understanding of all one, to love, you know, um that's definitely been what's kept me coming back.
Mm-hmm.
As well as, you know, the other half of meditation though is really the day to day. And it's when you know, I meditate every morning when I wake up, and it's the very first thing I do. And I don't look at my phone, and I don't, you know, I really just take the first 20 minutes of my day to be present. And, you know, sometimes it's really about looking at what's going on with me. You know, sometimes I'll think, God, like I'll wake up and I'll have all kinds of feelings. You know, I might feel panicky. I might feel, you know, a little anxious. I might feel sleepy. I might feel really inspired or motivated or excited. And, you know, part of meditation is really just being able to be with what is and hold what is and accept what is, even if it's not one of those incredible moments where you're feeling tapped in. And that's the real work, and learning to kind of understand ourselves and have compassion for ourselves. And um, it's sometimes I'll tell my students or my clients, like, it's like I'm sort of checking the weather in the morning. Like I sit for 20 minutes and I sort of see, like, where am I? How am I showing up today? I certainly have I have a number of different types of prayers or mantras that I work with, and gratitude practices. Sometimes I work with the serenity prayer, which I don't know if you're familiar with that. But I love the serenity prayer. And so I think as much as the practice is about those incredible, blissful, enlightened moments, as it is about kind of the days when you're sitting with anxiety, or the days when you're sitting with discomfort, or, that's a big part of the work.
I love it. Julie, this has been amazing. How can people find out more about you? Where can they get the book?
Beautiful. Well, you can get the book on Amazon. It's called Inner Wealth: How Wellness Heals, Nurtures, and Optimizes Ultra Successful People. And you can find my website. It's called Hey It's Golden, HeyIt'sGolden.com. And you can reach out to us for support with your teams, with your companies, or for individual one-on-one coaching or support.
Julie, I can't thank you enough. This has been amazing.
Trey, this has been awesome. I'm so grateful for your time, and just to have the opportunity to have this conversation. And yeah, nice work.